My name is George Holtgren. I'm the lead developer for Wayward, Terran, Zero Falls, and I'm here to rant about the new patch a bit. I apologize ahead of time. This is going to be kind of a long video because I like to go off in tangents and just rant endlessly. But if you're into kind of the technical stuff, I want to talk about the new changes in the Alpha 2.1 patch. We've made a lot of changes in this version. There's a bunch of new stuff, and I'm not going to try to show off the new tech without giving away too many spoilers for the most part. I'm going to kind of fly around, play the game a bit, and, meanwhile, just rant about some of the new stuff while showing it to you. First of all, I want to talk about why this patch took so long. We're kind of early in the development, and it's a good time now, if any, to sort of overhaul huge systems that need to be overhauled, and one of those systems was our rendering pipeline. Sometimes when you start a new project, one of the first things you write ends up being one of the worst things you write, and that was definitely true for Wayward, Terran, Frontier. The very, very first thing I ever wrote was code to sort of take a ship and draw it on the screen. And so I have two clients open right now because I want to show you sort of the difference. This is the old client in this little window here, and it represents the old rendering system. We basically didn't use any GPU tricks. It looks semi-3D. We had bump maps and specular maps and everything, but it wasn't that fast. In fact, it had performance problems. And you can see the popping in and out of asteroids there as I zoom out. Basically, this system was very poorly designed under the hood. And the way that I actually position objects when drawing them used crummy math, and it was slow. You can still see, like, I can render quite a lot of objects, and it only slows down when I sort of render, when I sort of zoom all the way out. But it was pure 2D. This is purely two-dimensional. There are some sort of 3D parallax backdrop objects, but the reason they disappear when you zoom out is because the 3D effect on them wasn't so great, and when you would zoom out it would look really, well, stupid. And we got to the point where we wanted to implement some new rendering tricks, and I found a bug with ship destruction where pieces were flying off and they were invisible. I went to try and fix them, and I found out the reason they were invisible is because my camera code sucked, and so I basically said, okay, let's just rewrite the whole thing from scratch. So, if we're going to do a side-by-side comparison, it doesn't look, maybe I can get them side-by-side here, doesn't look too different initially, but if you look close at some of the details on the station, you'll find that the light is better, a little bit. Hard to notice until you have some nice light effects, but what you'll notice in this version is that the parallax on the asteroids is perfect now. What you might not notice in this video because of how I'm recording is that it's much faster. We get 60 frames per second while seeing every object in the scene and every backdrop object in the scene. The 3D is perfect now. The reason is because we've replaced the camera system with a fully 3D camera. So everything in the world now is completely 3D. And we have new bump maps, new specular maps, new reflect. I guess it's not even specular anymore. We're using reflective maps, so we can have reflective objects, and everything is looking way better. If I can show you some other ships here. I think I have this one, and just the light on everything is way better now. And in addition to everything looking better, which was a lot of work, we basically had to replace every single texture for the bump maps and the roughness maps for every ship. So a lot of work went into replacing that stuff. And I'm going to move a little light around here and you can see. But there was sort of an ulterior motive to getting that rendering system set up, is because another thing that I wanted to do, which I'll try to demonstrate in a moment, is the backdrop system. I wanted to solve a number of problems with the backdrop system, and I don't really know where to start explaining this, but one of the first problems I had with the backdrop system is that it was all just in my static code, in that, I'm working with Jan, and Jan's making almost all the art for the backdrops. Anytime he'd make a really cool backdrop, like maybe the animated backdrop that you see on the main menu, I would have to implement it in my code in order to make it work. And so I kind of started thinking, like, how I'm going to solve this backdrop problem to get it to be easier to put a new backdrop in. And I wanted the parallax objects in the backdrop to be sort of, well, I wanted them to use the 3D camera, so the backdrops really needed the 3D camera overhaul, but once I had the 3D camera, I kind of started going crazy trying to figure out how to solve the backdrop system, and the solution I came up with kind of rolled into the start of the mod API. And that's the other thing that I'm going to talk about that's new in this patch is we've begun work on what is basically going to turn into the mod API. And the mod API is going to be it's going to manifest as an extensions directory. I'm going to demonstrate here. I'm going to go to another system. I've already got this backdrop system in place. You can see there's smooth transitions between zones now. We're officially in the other zone now. You can actually see the edge of the zone you're about to head into before you get there. So now you can see by the mini-map I'm not actually in that zone yet, but I can already start to see the asteroids from it. So I'm like, if I'm flying at max speed, I know that maybe I'm going to crash into something. That was I don't know if that feature was requested, but I definitely found it irritating to be flying really fast and to fly into asteroids. Anyways, so the new backdrop system uses an external system for extensions. That is, I've created a new project and written a bunch of backdrop code, and the backdrop code references a external set of DLL files, and essentially the game loads backdrops from outside the game. And the plan is to take that project, the backdrops project, if you will, and first sort of extend it into a much bigger project that encompasses more than just backdrops, and then make that open source so that the community can use it to add all sorts of different code to the game. And it's using reflection to just put external code directly into the game. We developed this on .NET, which means that the best scripting language for .NET is just going to be .NET. In C#, it's really easy to use reflection to just bring in external code at runtime and say, hey, run every module or every class that's in this external file, just run it. And so that's what I'm doing with backdrops. So you make an external backdrop class, you drop it into a DLL, drop the DLL into an extensions folder, and then when the game boots up, it checks everything in the extensions folder. It sees that you've got a new backdrop type. The backdrop type is associated with a specific color, because I always use color as a sort of a unique key to represent things in this game. It's like just the trend that I've had up to this point. So I figured it was good to continue that. And the reason I did that is because that allows you to take a backdrop that you've created, assign it to a color, and then you can go into another file that's in the data folder and just draw your color, draw pixels of your color to represent assigning your backdrop to specific sectors. So you'd have like a two-dimensional image where every pixel represents a sector on the universe map, and say you want your backdrop to apply to this sector right here, you just draw your color on that pixel, and maybe that one and that one, that one, that one. Your backdrop will apply to all those places, and it'll run your code when rendering the backdrop in those places. The game itself handles the transitions between different zones, and the blending, and the loading and the unloading of your content from memory. And so And so the game sort of, from a programmer's perspective, from my perspective, I no longer have to worry about what the backdrop is going to do. It's kind of out of my hands. It frees up my mental bandwidth by not forcing me to have to deal with it directly, because the code for the backdrop can be changed without my knowledge. The backdrop will start looking different, but it doesn't really affect the game code, which means that my time can be spent developing other things. Overall, it's going to free up the development process quite a lot. But the most exciting aspect of it is that it's going to lead into the mod API, which is something that I think is going to be really exciting, because using reflection to load stuff from outside of the game is going to allow me eventually to not crash into this asteroid, sorry. It's going to allow me eventually to have all sorts of things loaded from outside of the game. I'm going to use the same method in the same project to eventually bring in new types of turrets. I'm going to bring in new types of ships, new types of modules is something that everyone has requested quite a lot. And that's all of those things aren't in right now because they're going to probably take a lot of work to get in. But the idea is that if I now go and overhaul the system for how modules work to get them to conform to the API that I use for loading backdrops, you should be able to write the code for a module and drop that into the extensions folder. You load into the game, and everything in the world of Wayward Terran Frontier is either a ship or a module, and ships are just the sum of their modules. So you've got thruster modules and room modules and hallway modules and life support modules and conduit modules, and they're all of them are defined as modules. So every 16 by 16 square of this ship is owned by some module. If you could define a module outside of the game, you could change 100% of the game using external code. And so that's kind of my long-term goal as regards to getting the game to be more data-driven and more mod-friendly. Once you can change modules, you can change everything from how much thrust the various thrusters give, to how strong the engines are, to how powerful the guns are, to how fast they can turn, to even adding interesting effects like new missile launchers. If I get the code to be fully modular, right now it's a lot of it's like kind of tied in, like things like shield generators, for instance, will require some code that exists outside the module in order to function, like to repair the shields. But if I can take that away so that it's all part of that extensions API, then there'll be really no limit to what you can do to the game. Also, on a very short-term notice, we're working on getting the actual terrain objects that you can interact with, the asteroids that you can mine into, the stations that spawn on the maps, the enemies, that sort of stuff, to also be part of the mod API, so that you can literally change every aspect of the universe from external code. That will be eventually made open source. It's not right now, just because I'm going to be changing that project every single time I implement a new portion of the API, which means that if you started writing external code right now, I would probably break your code every month or so, and then you'd be pissed off because you'd have to rewrite all of it. So it's not going to do you much good for now, but it's probably good to know that it's sort of in progress. So that's pretty much the extent of the content that's pretty much the extent of the code overhauls that we made for that game. You can imagine that if we completely overhauled the rendering system, that it just took a lot of work. We have to redo the code for a number of different scenes and make sure that everything worked. It's a pretty fancy new rendering system. And but we also added a bunch of new content, and I'm trying to think the best way to sort of demonstrate the new content. Some of it you'll see new sounds and stuff for doors, but we also have added a bunch of new types of items. This is a rifle now, for instance. Guns have a different function. They use reloading instead of a slow regeneration, and they also have different art for different types of guns. This is a really powerful rifle, and as you can see, it's powerful enough that I can punch holes in my ship with it. Great. I punched a hole in the wall. I'm not crashing into anything right now, but and then the only other feature that is that's new, maybe not the only other feature, we've changed lots and lots of little things, fixed some bugs and optimizations here and there, but if you go exploring, every now and then you will find... My game does not like running two clients at the same time. I should close this one. You go away. Every now and then, if you go exploring, you might find one of these. Where is it? Ah, there you are. Sometimes there's stations out there now, just hiding out in the asteroid belts, and the stations have new loot in them, and they also have a new game mechanic in them. And the game mechanic is very early in development, but let's see if I can show you this without causing too much trouble. So, if you go exploring, you'll find that the stations are, well, out there, and they're full of monsters that will attack you, and they're full of loot that's better than the loot that's in ships. So I suggest you go out looking for them. I'm not going to explore them too much. I don't want to give away any of the awesome new loot. But the monster system is also kind of a new system. They don't act exactly the same as crew. They have a lot of different properties from crew, namely the fact that they don't have a unique ID, so you can have basically an unlimited number of them. And they can be a lot stupider, but in a way that's better because you don't want them flying ships, you just want them attacking the player. And we can have a whole bunch of different types of monsters. So I guess what you would say overall is that this patch added some new content, but mostly it added frameworks for adding content in the future. There isn't a lot other than the new stations, but with the new backdrop system, we're already have in the pipeline some really cool stuff, including maybe some awesome pirate-related stuff that I'm not gonna give away because exploration is kind of part of the fun. And then one last feature that we have is requested by the fans: the ability to kill yourself. Yay! Now I'm gonna respawn. That's literally all it does, but sometimes people have gotten stuck, whether in a ship that couldn't move anymore, or just because the game spawned them in a wall, one way or another. They requested the ability to sort of respawn yourself. Now you see I have a different weapon. It looks like I have a auto shotgun. Yay. That pretty much sums up the list of the new features that I want to reveal. The command and control stuff, like the logistics room, pretty much works the same. There's a new section to your station that's not really used yet, but spawning ships, not that different, it just looks better. There is one feature. I don't have enough energy. Well, I can demonstrate this. You can now tractor ships onto a docking port. So, I don't know if that's very exciting, but I'll demonstrate it. A lot of people get a ship and they fly it back to their base, and then they find that they either can't dock it or they died before they could dock. Point is, if you have a ship that's kind of just floating in space here, and say you really like this ship, but you were stupid and you walked out the airlock. You know what happens sometimes. When when you respawn, which takes a second because it's got to load the station. Now you can go to your logistics room over here, and when you right click on that, I would like to tractor it to a dock. It'll just put it back onto one of those docking bays so that I can go get it again. So that's pretty much it for the new features. You should, if you're a member of the alpha, you should download the latest update and check it out. I'm going to be uploading a bunch of bug fixes because I'm sure I introduced a bunch of new bugs. We've already uploaded one bug fix, and I've got another in the works that's going to do some memory management optimizations, hopefully. Try to solve the random crashes when entering a station. It's actually caused by memory problems, so I've got a pretty big optimization that's going in there in the next patch. So if you are trying it and you're getting crashes, be patient. I'm working on it. And now that this big framework change has gone out, hopefully patch progress will come with slightly faster pace, because we don't have to completely redesign half the game every time we want to release something. And the new camera system is going to make things faster. Anyways, I'm going to exit, and that's it for the video. I'll have links in the description, and thanks for watching.